Hey everybody, welcome to X-Oriente, the new voice of Brotherhood.
Hi,
I'm uh,
everyone.
I'm your worshipful caster, Eric Diamond.
I'm your right worshipful caster, Jason Van Dyke.
Damn right, worshipful. Um, so we're a little bit late today. The reason is because Jason got up on a soapbox and would not get down,
I
and
did. I was,
I finally had to shoot a tranquilizer dart at him.
yeah, it
Which
happens.
is great because like when we start to have conversations like this is like I'm always like we have to stop. This is a show.
Right.
This is a show.
Shut up. Shut up and record. Shut up and record. I get it. I get
So
it.
hey, before we get started, I wanted to we have some new executive producers I want to welcome into the fold. And I have put together some new kits. Welcome to Ed King, to Ted Langdon, to Asher Samuels, to Brett Robinson, and just a few minutes ago, Joshua Brockman has become our newest executive producer. The kits are going
Nice,
out.
nice.
We ordered some more printing stuff today, and the lapel pins and all that good stuff. All that swag is coming, and we're getting ready to like start working on some other special swag products for the executive producers. So, thank you,
Thanks, guys.
thank you, because what you
Really
guys do
appreciate it.
supports the show. If you want to become an executive producer, we ask you to pledge $5 a month to help us pay for all this fantastic technology and bandwidth. So which allows us to do this with video and we're also working on some special projects that'll be only for the executive producers on the Patreon page. So one of the things that we're putting together is a lecture on Kabbalah. The other thing that we're in production on is a lecture that I gave at the Scottish Rite last year called Masonry is a Religion, which is kind of an interesting, fun talk. So if you'd like to get access to that, you can by becoming an executive producer. You can do that by going to our Patreon page at www.patreon.com/X-Oriente and making a pledge. So we thank you for your support.
Thanks, everybody.
So today I wanted to talk about social media. You know, we talked about technology in the last show with the guys from Kopiri, and you know, we talked a little bit about kind of the things that we like in terms of technology and how technology can kind of help inform Masonry. But I'm starting to realize that there's also a dark side to social media, specifically. Not so much technology; it's more social media specifically. And my fear is that if we're not careful, it's going to kind of seriously damage Freemasonry, and it'll do that kind of damage because so many people are on social media today. Do you any thoughts?
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. I think that I think that social media is incredible. It's an incredible tool to bring people together, but it's also a really great tool to rip people apart. And that's just it's hyper socialization, right? Um,
What do you mean by that?
we do this because I mean by that we do this in our everyday life with people that are close to us, right?
Hmm.
So let's talk previous to the internet. Previous to the internet, you had your work friends, your friends after work, things like that. People that were physically close to you.
Hmm.
Maybe the phone calls, things like that. But it's generally a relatively small group of people. And you lose touch with people, you get back in touch with people, kind of back and forth. But then social media comes, and now I can be in touch with all of my friends, hundreds of people that I know that are acquaintances and actual friends. I can be in contact with those people at all times. And it's funny because I think about this all the time. These little, in a conversation, little things that you say that can offend someone, that have the potential to offend someone. Um, Sometimes it depends on, is that someone just going to give you the benefit of the doubt, or are they going to go, no, that was a dick remark, and I don't like you for it, and I'm going to fight you on it. But 9 times out of 10, people will just say like, "Oh, maybe you didn't mean that," or maybe I took it the wrong way, and you kind of move on in conversation, and it's over. In social media, on the internet, you're typing stuff. You're leaving it there. There's an archive of it. You can go back and replay that as many times as you want and go, no, I'm sure he meant it. He's a jerk. And I'm not going to let that stand. I've got to fight back about that. And that starts this vicious circle of, fight, 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 fight. And you're doing it with so many more people, right? And so there's so many more opportunities for these little slip ups to create big problems. And I think that we just don't understand the potential pitfalls of this technology yet. We're starting to, but we're not there yet. We're not fully cognizant of it yet, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's interesting. Like this morning, and I'll tell you this. I get kind of obsessive about checking Facebook. Part of it is because I work with it.
Mm-hmm.
It's part of my professional life, and so that makes it kind of I don't know.
The irony shouldn't be lost on you right now. That
it's not. In fact, I said that when I announced that we were going to
Facebook right now.
We were going to talk about it on Facebook. I said the irony is not lost on us.
Right.
Because I do work in this part of the the electronic world, I guess. But there was this thing. Let me just see if I can pull it up real quick. It was in, I think Juan Sepulveda.
Mm-hmm.
He's one of the Masonic Roundtable guys, and he does the Winding Stairs podcast. He has a Winding Stairs Masonic group, which of late has had some kind of pretty heated discussions. They got to the point where it was pretty unpleasant. I can't seem to find it right now, but
hey, while you're looking at that, I want to talk real quick while you find that. I want to talk about some of the feedback that we got on our post about tonight's show. Just the show announcement. We got a couple of comments on here. Ryan Cerrone, I think, here's my crappy liberal in me. I may be over ethnicizing his last name. It could be Cerrone. But Ryan says, very interested in thoughts on your idea of Facebook activities as a known Mason in your community and how they would be seen as a reflection and an extension of your lodge as a whole. Bam, done. I mean, that's really the point too, Ryan. And that's that, what I talked about, which is that, now there are all these opportunities for you to insult people on a micro level, macroly. That extends also into your reputation and the reputation of the craft as a whole.
Yeah.
And I think
those are insults that are hard to take back, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's you've hit on probably the biggest thing here, Ryan, is that this is, social media is reputation. It's reputational currency, basically. And so that's really, really important. How you behave on social media will stay forever, regardless of what mood you were in then and what mood you're in now. It's always going to be there. So that's always going to be a potential embarrassment for someone. So that's great. That's awesome comment.
So you brought up something. You just sort of like spat it out a little bit, but it was very important what you said, and that was, you used the word currency. You said reputational currency. And I think one of the reasons that social media is so dangerous is this idea. There's this thing in social media, in social media marketing, we call social currency, right? And what social currency is the motivation for us to post stuff on social media, on Facebook. If you think about like people who you follow on Twitter, for example, you might follow, newsmakers, right? You might follow comedians, right? You might follow, sci-fi actors, or people in the comic book world or something like that. There's a lot of and those people are posting. Why? Because they're trying to look cool. They're trying to look smart. They're trying to be funny. They're trying to get you to endorse them, right? With a like, with a share, with a retweet, with a,
Mm-hmm.
with a click, right? And that's called social currency. And it's a very, very powerful motivator. And so what we do in social media marketing, right, is we try to create the kind of content that gives the brands that we work for social currency, and at the same time encourage people to want to sort of use our brand as a form of social currency for them, right?
Sure.
That's really, really, that's really, it's very powerful, but it's also very dangerous to having a discussion, because when you're having a discussion, now there's two things that you're trying to do, right? You're trying to look smart, and you're trying to get social currency out of the things that you're saying, right? And at the same time, you're not listening to the other person, right? So a true back and forth conversation isn't happening. What you're doing is you're everybody's shouting. Imagine like you're in a crowded room. Imagine you're at a table lodge, right? You're at a table lodge, and there's 100 people. Like I'm just thinking of the room like when Mariners Lodge does their beef steak, or Independent Royal Arch Number 2 does their big table proceeding, right? And you've got a whole bunch of guys in tuxedos, right, sitting around an enormous table, right, and everybody's shouting, trying to be heard, just trying to get their voice to be the loudest over everybody else. Nobody's talking to each other. Nobody's listening. Nobody's talking with each other. They're just trying to make points, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that is the dynamic that you get on Facebook, right? And so people are like posting witty gifs, and they're trying to find clever ways to
Right.
say you're an idiot,
Right.
and they're not really listening to the intent of what's being said. They're not trying to, they're just sort of.
Sometimes in a typed message, it's impossible to find the intent.
Yeah. Oh,
You know what I'm
yeah.
saying?
Absolutely.
So, and what's interesting is that emojis are they're an attempt to try and get at that intent. But even those, people read what they want to read. They read it how they want to perceive it.
That's right.
And so, yeah, so you really can't get away from those facts.
Well, and they read it with an evaluative eye to,
Right.
what is this doing to my social currency? Is this bringing me up or making me look dumb, or
When I say reputational currency, I mean it in a very similar sort of a way. But what's being traded, social currency is very real. It's very upfront. It's what you're trying to do at the front end of that.
Mhm.
Reputational currency is the stuff that's behind it.
Yeah.
It's a macro look at that. And I say currency because it fluctuates. It goes up and it goes down. Where is your reputational rating right now? Do people think of you well, or do they think of you poorly? And that is going to move throughout kind of your inhabitants on social media.
Mm-hmm.
And your reputational currency is in a direct correlation with who you represent. So your fraternity, your business, those types of things that you associate yourself with, your reputation rides along with theirs, and they kind of move in tandem. And so that's unless you're really thinking about that all the time, which most people aren't. Social media can be a dangerous place. And
Yes.
so Mike, the intern just popped up and said, social media may not be killing Freemasonry, but it's killing the art of the conversation. 100%. Your conversation is stunted by the fact that you've got to type it out and quick. And real conversation happens orally. Real conversation happens when you can look somebody in the eye, you can read their body language. There's so much more about communication than just the words.
Even just their voice. I mean, even just
Correct.
like, like I remember as a teenager spending hours and hours and hours on the telephone with my friends, and I would spend a good 3 or 4 hours a night
Yeah,
just talking to my friends and
that's right.
talking and having conversations. But at least in those conversations, there's a pregnant pause. There's a silence. There's a, you can detect emotion in the,
There are social cues.
yeah,
Absolutely.
that you don't get in social media.
That's absolutely correct. So I think that I think that we titled this show purposefully,
Yeah.
but it's not. Obviously we don't think that it's killing it, but I think that there is a real danger to this stuff, and that as Masons we ought to be learning that we're held to a higher standard. We should be held to a higher standard, and should be comporting ourselves as such in our social media interactions, which are becoming a bigger and bigger part of our lives. It's how we communicate with a big group of friends. Um, and so I think but that's just it's like I said, it's dangerous.
Yeah. Well,
you know,
there's another aspect to it that is concerning, right? Which is that the temptation when you're interacting with brothers every day is
right?
that I'm getting my masonry here, right?
Yeah,
I'm in my lodge's group. I'm in the
there
winding
you go.
stairs. I'm discussing
There you go.
Freemasonry. I may be discussing it with people that I gravitate to, and maybe they're of like mind, right? And so, what do I have to go to lodge for, right?
Yeah,
Like it becomes it can become a deter. Now, it can have the opposite effect, right? It could encourage you to go to lodge, but it could also be a deterrent because you think that you're having social interaction with people, and that's not the case,
yeah,
right? You're not really having
yeah. I'll buy that.
social interaction with people.
Yeah. Mike the intern also just chimed in and said it kills the ability to use good judgment in your responses, and that's exactly what we're talking about. That's
Yeah, and that's
those
and that's true.
cues.
Yeah, that's true of any digital medium because once you commit, the internet remembers everything forever and ever and ever. So
Hmm.
once you commit something to writing like that, there's a rule of thumb in business that never send an email when you're angry, right?
I don't
Never.
listen to that.
I know. I don't. I have a hard time with that one myself, but like never. It's true though. Never do that,
Yeah,
and
it is. Yeah.
because social media is so immediate. It's so like
Hmm.
that.
My good friend Morgan here in town is my is the ego to my id. Uh, I get angry quickly and just freak out. And before I go and do anything rash, I always call Morgan, just let loose, and tell him all of the people that I plan to eviscerate and leave a trail of their viscera along the road. And he always says to me, "Okay, that was good. Now that you're calmed down, we're going to talk about what you're actually going to do."
Right. Yeah.
And I think everybody needs that, really, honestly. And you ought to have someone there to balance you a little bit before you go posting on social media, especially when you're angry.
Yeah.
Even when you're joyful, it's probably a good idea to check that joy a little bit and go, is that bragging? Is that being is that being a scumbag? Should I really say that stuff? Is it okay? Because judgment is judgment is key.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah.
There.
So Joe Martinez also just popped in, and he says, look at people today applying for jobs and the potential employers that check their social media before they even come in for an interview. And you're 100% right. So I mean, like, there are real stakes here. This isn't just Freemasonry. There are real stakes because Freemasonry is one thing, but you going out and getting another job, they are going to check that stuff. They're going to look at the conversations that you've had and how you treat other people, and they're going to hold that against you.
Yeah. Well, and it's not just there; it's in Masonry as well. So I can think of 3 or 4 guys that we've turned away from our lodge
Mhm.
simply because their Facebook page was just a
Yeah,
mess of bizarro conspiracy theories and
absolutely.
abusive language and behavior and just downright strange photography that
That's right.
was inappropriate.
Absolutely. And remember that, our job is to take good men and make them better, not just men, make them good, you know?
Yeah.
So, you're 100% right to be looking at that stuff and saying, yeah, no,
Yeah.
we can't move the needle much there.
Yeah. I think the other thing too is that because social media is kind of a multimedia affair, we become very what's the word? Susceptible to be spreaders of propaganda,
Ooh,
right?
yeah. Yeah,
So
totally.
so like, I see it all the time when, like people have these sort of memes that are somewhat political in nature. Sometimes they can be racist, sexist, offensive, and they're using those as ways to again, this is why are they doing it? Well, they're doing it to try to increase their social currency. They're trying to
Mhm.
get that aha, I've got you now, kind of thing in the discussion, and it's a form of talking at people rather than with people. And one thing that I find in threads, and here's a really good example. So I found that example of the I'll just call it the I actually think it's an attempt to troll, right? So for those who don't know, all trolling is when you say something on social media to deliberately bait people, to deliberately get an emotional rise out of them, to deliberately try to, you know, get at them and get them upset, right? And so this guy kind of wrote, um, he said, "How does one of the craft reconcile all of the Judeo-Christian overtones in our ritualistic practices?" Now I won't say who posted it because it's not really important, but that clearly is like that just seemed trollish to me. Like really? What? How do I reconcile? Like, you know what I mean? Like it was like, oh, okay, I see what you're doing here, and I just like,
I
not gonna
I
engage, not gonna
disagree.
go there.
I disagree. I think it's being provocative
Uh huh.
uh, on
How do you?
purpose. It's not
No, no,
being
no.
troll. It's not being trollish.
I think
I
it
think
is.
I think being trollish is my definition of trolling is a little bit more narrow than yours. I, every time I think of trolling, I think of like Loki. Um, I think like you're doing it just to sow chaos. You
Yeah,
just want to see what
I
I want to see it burn because I just want to see it happen.
I think that
I just
I
want to see
think
what. I don't know if it was.
I think
I
it was,
I
and
think
you know why? You know why I say that? Here's why I say that.
yeah, right.
Because he didn't he didn't ask the real question. The real question he was perhaps wanted to bring up was, with the overtones of religion that appear in Freemasonry, how can Freemasonry have those overtones and yet still claim that it's non-religious? Right? That's the
Yeah.
question.
Okay.
But how do
Yeah.
I
Fine.
reconcile? Like do I need to
Well.
reconcile? You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like,
I don't. Listen, I'm going to defend the guy just because someone needs to. It, it- you know,
God, you're such a
Martin,
contrarian.
Joe Mart, yeah, Joe Martinez says it was trollish. Good responses though.
Yeah.
Disagree with you too, Martinez. Don't know what you're talking about. It's this is see, I'm gonna defend him because not everybody's a great communicator, right? What he put out there, he probably thought, well, this is provocative. I'm putting it out there because I want to get people's strong opinions. I want to kind of prime the pump, as it were. Maybe that's what he's doing. But again, we have no idea. And the thing is, I take it as a hey, great, this is fun, until he says something real churlish, I'm okay. You, on the other hand, took it in a totally different way. And that's exactly the point that we made in the beginning of this when I said there's no way to judge intent. And so what you find trollish, I find provocative.
Mm-hmm.
And That's a problem. That's a problem because his meaning wasn't clear.
Just
Martinez just said, prepare for my smarmy GIF responses.
bring them on, Joe. Bring them on.
You got a love for that. Good for you. Well done, Joe. Well played. You know, and you know, this is a great example of this stuff, right? Is that this is fun. And the thing is because, you know, Joe can tell that I'm not, you know, I'm not being a jerk to him. I'm just saying, you know, let me move this conversation forward by being the devil's advocate, I guess. And the thing is that he would never know that if we were typing this stuff, you know, Joe might be like, what a dick. Like, I can't believe you just said that stuff to me, you know?
Yeah.
Because there's no way to judge that intent. It's only what you're reading, you know?
Yeah.
He doesn't know if I'm saying that sarcastically or if I'm saying that, you know, in a very real kind of a way. To use a Louis C.K.ism.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Well,
so
I think that's a definite like problem with social media as an arbiter of Masonry, right? As a way of expressing Masonry, is that it's an incomplete form of communication. The fact that you're having to, and I can't stress the social currency aspect of it too much, because what social currency, it's insidious, right? Because what it does is it makes you have to get the last word. It makes you have to reply and escalate, right? So you can't, like, It's hard to de-escalate when passions flare. And so rather than subduing our passions on social media, we inflame them. And we inflame them because social media incents us to inflame them, right? We have likes, we have, you know.
I think that's a really, really important point that I want to repeat, is that, like, we're supposed to subdue our passions. Social media only operates to inflame them. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's a really, really, I didn't want you to run over that too quickly.
No.
Because that's a big deal right there. You know, this is exactly what they're talking about when we talk about subduing our passions.
Right.
This is precisely it. So.
Yeah. Maybe we need to add that. Maybe there's like a new catechism for social media. But I think that you know, and the other aspect of social media, and we've talked a little bit about this, is the immediacy of it, right? So that when someone asks you a question, do most people go out and Google the topic? Do they do a little research before they respond? No, they don't. They just respond.
Yeah.
Right. Or they'll respond with something that they've been told, or something emotional that feels good, and in the process is maybe insulting a whole class of brothers,
right?
Simply out of ignorance, right? And so, like, instead of saying, I don't understand what you're saying, can we get more information? There's just this sort of, like, snap response that gets into the sort of the escalation war. And then what happens is that people are, and people just do this as a matter of course, because we don't actually teach this in Masonry, and good Lord, we should, which is logical fallacies. So, you have whole threads where it's nothing but logical fallacy after logical fallacy after logical, like you could write a book about it, right? So it's a
fact.
So what you have are these conversations that are very insubstantive. And they wouldn't be happening if people were face to face, because you could see that this person who's sort of badgering someone is being a dick, right? And you could just say, you know what, I'm going to leave the room, and we could do that on social media, but to do that is to sort of let the other guy, I don't want to say win. It's not about winning. And I have a total, like, I got seduced into this because, my thing is when I'm on a Masonic discussion on social media, and someone says something like patently stupid, and by stupid I mean, like, something that literally goes against the teachings of Masonry, right?
Mhm.
I feel like he's saying this in a public environment for all to see. And for me to stay silent is to endorse that somehow. So I feel compelled in social media to sort of point out the facts and
Right.
say, you know what? Actually, if you look at the data, it doesn't say that. Actually, if you go back and read this thing, it's not what it says. Right. And then it's kind of off to the races. Right. And I've always tried to, be respectful. Don't call people names. Don't resort to ad hominem attacks. Don't resort to, logical fallacies. But at a certain point, I have to ask myself, Eric, what the hell are you doing there? And why are you spending so much time doing that when you could be spending time doing something worthwhile, like helping a worthy distressed brother, Master Mason, right?
Sure.
And that is another like insidious aspect of social media, is like the great time suck that it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This stuff is not easy. That's the whole point of this, I think, is that it's just not easy. It's vexing.
It is vexing.
That's the word I'm looking for.
It is vexing. And look, it ain't all bad, right? There are some really some good things about social media. I mean, one of the things I love about it is that I can get updates and information on, like there's several close brethren of mine who are sick. And so getting updates about them is important, and being able to communicate with them is important. And you know who you are. I hope you get well soon. And, we're able to respond to our brethren who move away.
Sure.
There's good things about it.
Sure. So Chris Rulli, to the pre-show, to our show announcement, posted on here and said, it's another way to connect with members and even their significant others. And smart lodges leverage social media by creating Facebook pages and Twitter to disseminate information about meetings, events, their history. It's totally right. I mean,
absolutely.
And these days, social media and an internet presence are an absolute must-have. You have to.
Yeah, in fact,
you have to have content. You have to have it updated all the time.
Yeah, so I'm not even sure that you need a website anymore. I mean, maybe you still do, but it needs to be a single page, right? Here's who we are. Here's where we meet. Here's when we meet. Here's our officers.
Sure.
That's it.
For a lodge. Yeah.
For lodge.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It doesn't need to be very complex.
But everything else should and could be done on a social media group and a Facebook group. And it's funny, but like the things that are being discussed in groups like, the Winding Stairs is sort of a really big group, but my own lodges have a group, a Facebook group, and we talk about things that are sort of very local. There's no other way to say it. Like,
sure.
People will say, hey, I'm going to have some people over. Why don't you come over and we'll smoke cigars on my lawn and, smoke some meat or whatever and drink some beer, and
right.
Kind of impromptu things. Or, hey, we're going to go, one of the past masters of our lodge recently opened a brewery, which when you get to Chicago, Jason, we're going, man. Yeah. He's been brewing beer, for a decade. And he first brewed, he brewed. So we used to do when we go to York sessions, we would have a hospitality suite, and he would brew beer specifically for that. And it was called Past Master's Ale. And it was really, really delicious, just amazing. And he was this guy who built a really successful IT consulting business and sold it and did what he loves. He's now opened a brewery in Long Grove, and it's it's amazing, and he's sort of an example to all, so we can catch up with him, like, so that's a good, that's a good use for social media.
Agreed.
But I think, but here's the thing. I've had a couple of experiences with guys who are members of the bodies that I'm in that I've had really intense, unpleasant exchanges with on social media.
Mm-hmm.
And then had this like really unfortunate, like then, I had this one exchange with this one dude, and, kind of sent a message to a friend of mine and said, good Lord, I hope this guy isn't a Mason, or isn't part of our lodge. And it turned out he was, and not only was he part of our lodge, but they were considering him for membership to an invitational. Right. And it's sort of like when that happens, we don't realize it, but we could be burning bridges on the internet and not have any realization of that. Through social
absolutely.
media.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. And I'm sure, I'm sure, I know, I mean, we've lost a couple of executive producers because people don't like my liberal politics. And I understand that. I try not to get too political here, but, sometimes it's not a question of politics. It's a question of civics or a question of morality. And I think that, both of us are entitled to talk about issues like that. And people are entitled to vote with their feet too. Right. So, my wish and my ask would be that, if people disagree with us, tell us, we're the whole point of doing these shows is to have a dialogue and a conversation, even if it's not, all of us in the room, much as we'd like to do that.
Right.
Mike says that he's had brothers totally misinterpret his online remarks, and tell other brothers that they were talking about him. Yeah. It's like I said, it's an insidious kind of thing, and you can't sense intent. And here's the problem. We don't really have the tools to sense intent. Right.
Right.
So it's kind of like, if you want to know, it's funny, but we talk about, like, we were kind of talking about this a little bit earlier, before we went live, about programs, right? Lodge programs, and about what lodges could be doing and should be doing as part of their programs. And, we talk about a lot about Masonic education, and, most Masonic education I see is really bad. Like it's not real good.
I agree.
And it's not real good because it doesn't really kind of drill into the everyday situations that we face and how to handle them in a Masonic context. Right. And that's one of the, sorry.
Wait, okay. No. Let me take that a step further, because or actually drill down into it a little bit more, which is that you're 100% right. It doesn't accomplish that goal, but I think even below that, most Masonic education isn't written by professional educators who know what they're doing, who also know what they're talking about in Masonry. So they're not authorities in either subject. And then they end up writing Masonic education stuff. And if you're lucky, you get one or the other, but you never really get both.
Right.
And that's a big problem, because if you're looking for Masonic education, you ought to be getting it from someone who's an authority on Masonry and an educator who's an authority in education, who understands how to educate the public.
Maybe. I'm chafing a little bit at the idea of an authority on.
If it's packaged as Masonic education, it ought to be both. If you do it in your lodge, if it's Eric Diamond standing up and doing some Masonic education, fine. Then be the expert on the Masonic topic that you're talking about, right? Then you're giving some good Masonic education. But if you're trying to do it and you're packaging it as from a Grand Lodge level, or from an appended body headquarters or something like that, you better have both. You better understand pedagogy, and you better be an expert in the topic that you're trying to to talk about. And I think that we're sadly lacking in that.
I think it's less important than I think you're making it out to be more important than it is. But I'll tell you where I'll tell you where we go wrong. We don't really have a methodology to link what we talk about with what we do on a day-to-day basis.
But isn't that the mystery of Freemasonry?
Totally. It's absolutely the mystery of Freemasonry. And what I'm saying is that Masonic education should be to me, the purpose of Masonic education is to link those two things together, is to look at a 24-inch gauge and as a symbol and say, okay, here's what it symbolizes. Okay. But then don't stop there. Say, okay, now what do we do with this every day on a day-to-day basis? Right. And so those are questions that we should be asking. And I guess what I'm saying is that, like, to me, the idea of how should a Mason comport himself on social media with other Masons and with non-Masons, there's a whole year of Masonic education right there.
All right. Well, that's fair. That's fair.
Right.
I'll buy that.
I'm not saying, here's the thing. It's always good to have an expert. Like you get a better talk, you get a better, but to me, it's like, it's almost like, I hate to bring religion back into this, but it's almost like Bible study, right? The whole point of Bible study is that you read a story in the Bible and you say, okay, what does this teach us? And then how does it inform our life? Like, what should we do? Like, what does it mean to be a faithful person? What does it mean to be
okay. So, but there, you've got some pedagogy there, right?
Yeah.
You've got a point, you know what you're trying to teach. And a lot of times in our Masonic education, as Joe just piped in, and he's 100% right, is that most Masonic education is packaged crap. And that's 1,000% true. Mm-hmm. And the problem with it is that it doesn't know what it wants to do, and it's trying to do too much all at once. What you're talking about is a perfect example of, listen, I know what I'm talking about, and I know where I want to get, and it's feasible. I can get there in a lodge meeting. There's oftentimes I see this kind of packaged crap that's not feasible. It doesn't have realistic goals, and it doesn't get you to where you need to be in a reasonable amount of time. What are you doing? Are you trying to tell me about, the esoteric side of Freemasonry? Or are you trying to tell me that the esoteric side of Freemasonry really has something to do with my everyday life? Because that's where I want to get, So how are you going to get me there?
Well, I guess, maybe I haven't been exposed enough to crappy Masonic education.
You have. You just don't know
it. No, I've been exposed to some of that stuff, but a lot of times what for me is really dry Masonic education is when you're just simply talking about the history of something, or you're just talking about,
right.
Like some guy will get up. I remember, this is so long ago, but somebody gave a talk about like the Benedictine monks and how they informed Templarism and stuff. And I'm just like,
oh, you're such a prude. I dig it. I like it. I'm interested. I'd watch that.
Yeah, okay. But but it wasn't like it was given in lodge, right? It wasn't a documentary. It was,
I know, whatever. I'd sit through it.
Okay.
I'd probably hate it. I'm not going to lie. I'd probably hate it, because it would probably be someone who didn't really actually know what they were talking about when they were talking about that.
Or they knew too much.
Oh, yeah. Right? I've seen that too. I've seen that.
They know too much,
100%.
and they're talking about things that are just not interesting to the person who doesn't.
Correct.
Yeah.
10 pounds in the 5-pound bag.
Right.
I get it.
Yeah. But to me, like this idea of how one should regard social media is a big issue, especially for, our millennial generation.
Mm-hmm.
And it's only going to get worse. It's only, it's all because, Facebook is more and more, and now, I mean, now they're starting to ask those questions, right? So now you're starting to see experts starting to say, hey, you know what? Maybe we're spending a little too much time on social media. Maybe, maybe Facebook doesn't have, and it's funny because I think Mark Zuckerberg in his heart of hearts, really does want to connect people. Like, he does want people to have relationships. Right. So I'll tell you, here's a good Facebook story, right? This is I'm going to be a little bit of a marketing geek here, but it used to be that the way that you reached people on Facebook is you'd have a page, right? And people would follow you, and you would post to your page, and the things that you posted would show up in your followers' feeds, right? And that was called reach. Right. You would reach people with your content, with your messages. Right. Well, so what happened is and then what Facebook did was they started introducing sponsored posts. Right. So you could pay Facebook to have a post that was prioritized that would go up to the top of your feed. Right. And so that was called paid reach. And the other kind of reach, the normal reach, was called organic reach. Right. And in about 2013, organic reach started plummeting, absolutely plummeting, turfing, right? So companies were spending all this money. They were spending, millions of dollars to acquire fans, to get all these fans and likes and stuff like that. And now that they had those fans, they couldn't reach them organically. They had to pay Facebook to reach those fans because the organic reach rate was dropping. It went from around 18%, which is pretty good, down to 5% in the space of a few months. And so at the time, everybody in the media was like, oh, Facebook's being greedy, and they're just being, corporate assholes, and, people were very upset with Facebook, and they were just, we're going to abandon Facebook, and we're going to, go on a Facebook strike and stuff like that. Well, the truth of what really happened is that Facebook had kind of figured out that the number of posts that a person could possibly view in a day was 300. Right? That's like pretty much, if you're spending your entire day on Facebook, you can read 300 posts. So it kind of capped out your feed at 300 posts. So like anytime you go to Facebook, at any one time, there's 300 posts on that feed, and you could scroll in that one sitting without refreshing your page to get to all 300 posts, and it would stop, right? And you have to refresh the page, and then new things come in, old things fall off, right? But then, so the amount of posts gets capped at 300. But the amount of content that people are trying to stuff into your feed is growing exponentially, right? And so, like, it used to be, remember you would like buy something online. It would say, hey, do you want to, share it with your friends on Facebook that that you bought a burrito at this burrito place, right? So that's called frictionless content, and that contributed to this meteoric rise in the amount of content that's eligible to go into your feed. Well, when that happens, when you're capped at 300, that's sort of enforced scarcity, right? And so the odds of your post that you post to your page actually hitting somebody's feed gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, right?
Right.
And so, like, was this engineered by Zuckerberg? No, it's a natural response of things getting big, And so there's this idea that, you get big enough, you have to be evil, right? This idea that Google's, don't be evil, right? It's not about what they intend to do. I'm sure Zuckerberg's a nice person, like he was brought up properly, had good parents, went to good schools, he's not an amoral person. But when you get that big and that powerful, and you're governed by shareholders that they're not really sort of making decisions based on morality. They're making decisions based on shareholder value because they have to, right? You can't, you can't expect a company like that to behave in a moral way. And so now they're kind of in this pickle. And I think that this is we're starting to see kind of like a bit of a backlash in social media, right? Because people are starting to realize, maybe it isn't so healthy that we're spending all this time on social media and we're not actually seeing each other. We're not actually meeting face to face.
Exactly. Which is where we come in to the picture as Freemasons. We answer that question.
Mm-hmm.
We fill that need. And we've talked about that before.
Yeah.
Is that we're doing well in as far as getting millennial members, because millennials understand that almost intrinsically, that they need more than just what's online, that they need to actually have face-to-face socialization, and Freemasonry fills that need, and it fills it very well, I think.
So Joe said, he said, back to the point about social media, some of the best conversations and dialogue I've ever have been with people on social media, or I met them on social media. They don't have the deep, meaningful conversations about life and truth in my lodge. Listening to how much we spent on garbage bags and coffee cups seems to take up most of that time. I agree. Yeah. Yes, I've learned a tremendous amount on social media as well.
By the way, I would like for the record to reflect, I don't know whether to like that or to make the little cry face.
See, we need a likey cry emoji.
Right. I like it, but I'm crying for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So here's how I would solve that problem. It's funny. I hear that all the time, and I attend my lodge.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes what I do, and I can kind of get away with this because I'm a past master. Sometimes what I do is I'll just go in late because they take care of all the business stuff at first, and then But what I find is that when there's nothing to do, time expand. Like the meeting expands to fill the time available. So if you've got 30 minutes and nothing to do, then you're going to spend all 30 minutes talking about garbage bags and plastic cups and having a debate about it, because that's, people are there. You've opened, you've created your space. So one thing that you could do is everybody stands up, master gavels, everybody stands up, and you say, look, we're going to have our business meeting with everybody standing. So let's get through it. Right?
Listen, so I was having this conversation the other day in the office, because people always bitch about business meetings, right? And that's the thing, people don't come to lodge to hear us pay the bills and blah, blah, blah. Yeah. I don't know if I agree with that. I think that business is really important. And I think that there's a lot of responsibility pushed onto the shoulders of the master when it comes to this topic, which is that you need to have your ducks in a row when you're doing business so that you do it efficiently and well, right? In handling the business of the lodge, actually, if you really think about it, is part of your growth as a man, because you need to be handling business, paying your bills at home, doing all those things. They're not fun. They're not exciting. No one likes to open up bills, whether they be online or in the mail. And you have to do that stuff. That's the sustenance of a life. And lodge doing that is a reflection of life. Yeah, there's some boring crap that we got to take care of. And we're all going to have to sit here and suck it up and be adults about it. Now it's up to the master to do that efficiently, and plan for that and go, hey, I've got X, Y, Z. We have, 1, 2, 3 amounts of money. Here's what I'm proposing we do. Should we do that? Everyone goes, yes. And we do that. And that's it. That's how it works.
It's almost another show entirely. But
it is.
What I will say is that there are tricks, right? And we'll talk about them on another show. But one thing that you could do, one thing that we do at our lodge, is we have customary things that we buy. We buy 12 bottles of soda pop every month, right? And so with those customary things, we have a motion, we made a motion in lodge to say we only bring things up for a vote that are not customary. So in fact, we have our dais officers, like the junior warden will stand up and say, I make a motion that we pay all the customary bills. Seconded, boom, passed, done. Right. Then right. And then the senior warden is tasked with bringing, routine motions, right? Senior warden stands up. I move that the minutes be accepted as written on the secretary's table. Second, doom, done. Don't have to read minutes now. Right. I mean, there are things that you can do to that, but here's the thing. I think that those meetings get less dry when you have something to talk about, something deep to talk about. Right.
There you go. Yeah. Mike, the intern, just said that precise thing, right? Is that, lodge need to have an educational program that inspires deep discussion. 100%. That's totally true.
Yeah. But here's the thing, getting back to Joe's point. I mean, I've had good discussions on social media as well. I just think that and here's the thing, and this is what's really interesting.
I think, by the way, to me, that's crazy. I can't believe that you guys have had that. I don't. I just don't have those experiences on social media. Social media to me is way too immediate and too fleeting for those discussions to actually happen. But that's just me. That's just me. Again,
okay. I mean, I've had some very interesting, very informative exchanges on social media. But one thing I will notice is that when groups get large, that's when trouble starts. That's when trouble happens.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, sure.
Right? So, and there's a very good article, if you're ever interested, by Clay Shirky. Clay writes on he's a social, God, I don't even know what his background is. A social psychologist, sociologist. He was sort of one of the early writers on the internet and sort of communities on the internet. And he wrote this article called "We Are Our Own Worst Enemy." And what he does is he documents how in online communities, when they reach a certain size, have to tear each other apart. They have to shake itself apart.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I'm seeing is that it's funny. Like, this is a relative. My page is our page is a relatively small page. It's a relatively small community. We have really good quality conversations. I think when Juan's group started, when the Winding Stairs group started, and it was small, you had these really good, respectful, thoughtful conversations. And now that you have these huge numbers of people who are joining these groups, right? You have almost like you have too many opinions and not enough ground rules and not enough tradition for that. Joe says that generational gap has something to do with it. I agree. I think it's generational gap. I think it's your political leanings. I think it's your, how you see race. I mean, all of those things that affect us in society go into that group. And so when you take a really big group like that, for example, we had that show with Heather, right? A couple months ago.
Right.
Right. And it's sort of like, yeah, look, we don't have to endorse Le Droit Humane. We don't have to go visit their lodges, right? We can just sort of say, you know what? We don't recognize that Grand Lodge. Does it suck? Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't, but it's just not, it's like we're members of one church. We don't go to that other church, right? It's just, that's the way it is.
Right.
But it doesn't mean we don't have to be, I would never call her a fake Mason, right? That's not only is it rude, it's there's no purpose to it, right?
What I think is really cool about that is that, we communicate. We don't communicate Masonically.
Right. Yeah, no, exactly. And so the problem is when, and Mike correctly points out, he says it's exceptionally hard to moderate a large group like Winding Stairs. Absolutely. And there's this really interesting thing called Dunbar's number, which is one of the ways that, in 2013 we were able to crack this organic reach problem, right? Because, back in 2013, you had all these companies that were really angry at Facebook. And if you read the press, like, you can still see that, those articles they're saying, oh, Facebook's just being greedy. And Facebook's going like, we didn't change anything. We didn't do anything. We are not filtering people. Right. We're not, we don't understand where this is coming from. Right. Well, it was coming from this sort of forced scarcity and the size that Facebook grew at. So there's this thing. So there's this guy named Robin Dunbar. He's a British psychologist. And he came up with this thing called Dunbar's number. Dunbar's number is 150. 150 is Dunbar's number. And what Dunbar's number says is that people can have 150 relationships with other people. Real relationships where, like, a person, the name of their wife, that they have kids, that you have like a a real relationship with them. Right. Now, when the number of people that exceeds 150, one of two things will happen, or both. The first thing that happens is people break off into smaller groups. Right. So if you're a member of and this is, we see this in like groups like the Shrine, right? So you have a Shrine, there's a couple thousand guys in the Shrine, right? People break off into groups, they form units, or they form clubs, right? Within the Shrine. We have people like that in Lodge, right? You have the guys in Lodge who like to go riding on their motorcycles on the weekend. You have the guys who like to sit around and smoke cigars and drink scotch. And, and people sort of will coalesce into these smaller groups. The other thing that happens with Dunbar's number is that for the people above that 150 mark, the quality of the interaction gets shallower and shallower, right? So the CEO of your company, right, might know your name, right? He might remember where you sit, but he doesn't know anything else about you, right? So I work in a building of about 3,500 people, like 3,500 employees. I've met our CEO a couple times, right? Nice guy. He's, he knows who I am. He recognizes my face, but does he really know anything about me? Very little, right? And that's normal. That's a normal thing. That's Dunbar's number, right? So I think as these groups get bigger, it becomes harder and harder to have any kind of meaningful discourse. And so what we're going to see is, I think we'll see smaller groups emerge. And I do see this. I mean, I see like there's an esoteric Mason group that's pretty small. And I see, some of these smaller, more specialized groups. I mean, we have one for the podcasters, the Masonic, the Blue Room, right? Is the group of Masonic podcasters. And that's a kind of a reflection of that phenomenon.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think, so here, I guess here's the question. Joe talks about the anonymity of being behind the keyboard. People are always puffier. What does he say? Puffier in the chest.
I think that yeah. Well,
I think that's a social currency.
It is. It is social currency. But I think that what Joe is touching on there, I think, is getting to be less and less, because I think that it's a bit of an illusion, right? Is that, you're behind a keyboard. You're just words on a page. But I think that because we say that all the time now in pop culture, is that, well, they're just trolls out there because, you've got the anonymity of the web to hide behind. I think that becomes less and less of an excuse. And I think it just becomes, no, you're just a jerk, and I think that's like I said, it's becoming less and less. So who knows?
So what's the prescription? Is there one?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if there is one. I think it's to watch yourself constantly, to be a Mason, to practice Masonry, it's to be cautious in your interactions with other people, and to circumscribe your passions.
So a while back, we did a show on.
Sorry, everyone. By the way, I just realized I didn't plug in my computer, and it just gave me the low battery sign. So
Dun dun
hold
dun.
on a second.
So wire. So
Don't
go
mind the
back
man behind the
to
curtain.
a while back. We did a show on George Washington's rules for civility,
Mhm.
As applied to social media. And I think, I would encourage people to kind of revisit that. But there were two rules that George Washington had that I think were particularly useful here. One is this idea of, subduing your passions and protecting your reputation. But the other one was to whatever you say in company should have some kind. And I'm going to murder this thing here, but whatever you say in company should have deference to the people who are present, right? So you should know who your audience is, right? And if you don't know who your audience is, be extra circumspect, right? Because you might be railing against Islam, not knowing that there are Muslim brothers in this discussion somewhere who are watching. Or, you may be, saying offensive, racially offensive things or insensitive things without knowing that there might be people who would get upset by this. And in social media, it's like pouring gasoline on a fire, right? It inflames the passions rather than de-escalates. Mm-hmm. And then the other thing is that I think we have to be active in this. I'm not sure how we're going to do this yet. We have to think about this, but be more active listeners, right? Something that Stephen Covey used to say was, before you try to make someone understand, seek to understand before you seek to be understood.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So try to understand like where a person's coming from first. Right. And rather than sort of like, trip them up on their semantics or try to win points because they misspelled something or something like that. And, you're an idiot, like try to understand like what their question really is, really, like ask a few clarifying questions. Like, what do you mean by that? Where are you going with this? What's your purpose in saying this?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Exactly.
And then, then if you have to like, bring out the flamethrower, then by all means, do it, but right. Just be very circumspect, be very like, mm-hmm. Understand that if you're in a Masonic discussion board, chances are that person on the other end is a Mason, they're a brother, and they deserve some better treatment. And then the other thing is that, and this is something I think I'm going to kind of really try to practice and get better at, is just don't engage. You don't have to comment on everything. You don't have to jump in every time somebody says something stupid. There's a lot of stupid out there. And it's like
you can walk away.
You could walk away. Yeah.
So true. That's good. Those are great. Those are all fantastic. Yeah. Love it.
Cool.
All right.
So we'll have some good stuff next week. We're trying to line up another guest.
I think we solved more problems.
I hope so. At least we had a good discussion about them.
That's true.
Thank you to everybody who showed up and stuck with it and provided the comments. It's when you guys do that the conversation gets much, much more interesting. So
Agreed.
Thanks, and come back soon and bring a beverage. Wouldn't it be great? Wouldn't it be great if we could all just like magically like have cigars and scotch and stuff and just God,
that'd be wonderful.
That would be great.
That would be nice. Like
that kind of telepresence. All right. Yeah. So until next week, again, we really do want to know what you think of the show. We want to hear your suggestions. If there's a topic that you want us to talk about or think about or a guest you want to hear from, let us know. Drop us a line. You can reach us at X-Oriente@gmail.com by email. You can reach us on our Facebook page, which is where we're coming to you live now. You can send a message through the blog. There's lots of different ways to reach us. And I think, we used to have like an answering machine, like a Google Voice. You could leave a comment. I think I'm going to try to resurrect that, and then
That'd be fun.
yeah, people can just like leave audio comments, and we'll play them on the show.
That'd be great.
Wouldn't that be cool?
Yeah, it'd be super fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Those. So until next time, everybody, thank you very much for being with us, and we'll talk to you soon.
Good night, everybody. Thanks again.